The 2024 Seattle Seahawks have a lot of problems, and I'm going to do my best to dig into them. Just for a little bit of context, I'm a lifetime Seahawks fan. I've watched practically every game they've played over the last roughly 20 years. And I gotta say, 2024 has been one of the more interesting years when it comes to them not being a very good team. And I say that because from top to bottom, the whole franchise has issues. So in years past, when the Seahawks have struggled, you can say the defensive coordinator is not good. You can say the left tackle is not good. You can say the receiver's not good. But here in 2024, and you can even kind of go back the last few years, from top to bottom, they're just not a good franchise right now. Now, when I say that because they really don't have an owner. Since Paul Allen passed away in 2018, his sister Jody Allen took over the team. But even with that said, her taking over the team, she technically still has to sell the team by a certain date in the next couple of years. So she really has just kind of been the placeholder for the Seahawks ownership at this moment. And you can argue that she hasn't done a very good job running the team. Just look at the Trailblazers, who Paul Allen also owned. The Blazers have been ran into the dirt. I'm not even an NBA guy. That's just from afar. They're one of the worst teams in the NBA the last, 2 years, especially this year. They're awful. You could very easily make that argument about the Seahawks right now that they're trending in that direction. So again, it starts at the top. They don't have a real owner, and they're not going to have a real owner until Jody Allen sells the team to someone or some ownership group down the line in a few years, hopefully sooner rather than later. Then you move down on the totem pole. That's when you get John Schneider. Now, John Schneider's been with the Seahawks since 2010. Overall, has had a lot of success, in large part to great rosters him and Pete Carroll drafted early on in their tenure. But let's say since the 2014 season ended, when the Seahawks went back to the Super Bowl and lost, I would say that the Seahawks have been an average team. Yes, they've made the playoffs in that time, but they've never really vied for another Super Bowl since 2014. So since that last Super Bowl appearance, what has John Schneider really done? He has not drafted a good O-line. He did not replenish the great defense that they once had. They haven't redrafted a quarterback. Yeah, they've hit on Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. I would say those are pretty good draft picks overall, but that's about it since 2015. Honestly, when you think about it, you could have a few people here or there, but no stars were born since 2015. Again, other than if you want to argue DK or Lockett, sure. But there's no replacement for Russell Wilson. There was no replacement for Thomas and Chancellor and Sherman and Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright, the whole D-line when they were great. Furthermore, Schneider has never figured out the O-line ever with his tenure with the Seahawks. They have been pretty much middle to back of the pack the entire time since he's been there since 2010. Here in 2024, the Seahawks have one of the worst lines in football. There are going to be some different rankings on most websites, but generally speaking, the Seahawks are 28 to 32. That's not good. That's actually quite awful. Now, even when you think about, hey, in 2013 when they went and won a Super Bowl, that's probably the best O-line they had during Schneider's reign. And I'd have to agree. But if you pull up some offensive line rankings from that time, PFF, Yahoo, whatever you want to look up, they're right around 20 to 23. So they weren't even a league average line back when they won a Super Bowl. A lot of that was masked with Russell Wilson's scrambling ability and Marshawn Lynch being able to run through a brick wall. So it's very evident that Schneider and Pete Carroll, to an extent, did not replenish this team after going back to their last Super Bowl. Now moving down to the head coach, Mike Macdonald. I think Macdonald is a good defensive coordinator. I'm being slightly convinced. My gut is telling me that he's just not the guy for the head coach position. A good example would be Steve Spagnuolo. Steve Spagnuolo is a really good defensive coach, but he was not a good head coach. And as of right now, I think Macdonald is kind of falling into that category where if he is just the D coordinator, he's great. He can figure out the defense, implement what he wants, and really can just focus on that side of the ball. Whereas a head coach, obviously there's more responsibilities and issues you got to work out. And I hate to make this comparison, but I really feel like Mike Macdonald is a bit like Jim Mora when Jim Mora was with the Seahawks. And Mora only had 1 year back in 2009. He was awful, got canned for Pete Carroll. And I really feel like that is kind of the trajectory of Mike Macdonald right now. But this kind of goes back to them not having a real owner. So if you had a real owner, they'd make that decision quickly. Paul Allen saw, wow, Jim Mora is not the guy here. We're going to fire him and move on and go get Pete Carroll. But with Jody Allen not really being the true owner of the team, she's just a placeholder. She's not going to go out on a limb and fire Macdonald after 1 year, clean house, and hire whoever. That in of itself is frustrating, but I hate to say it, I just really feel like Macdonald is following the Jim Mora trajectory, and that's not a good thing if you're a Seahawks fan. Now getting down to the quarterback and the player personnel. Everyone has a different opinion about Geno Smith. Look, he is a league average quarterback at best in my opinion. Yes, I think he's able to shake the bust moniker off of him from his Jets days, and good for him. But he's never going to be a top-end quarterback. He is what he is. He is a B- quarterback at best, and he settles into C- to C territory. I don't think the Seahawks should pay him going forward. I don't don't think that is the smart move. And I know Geno is highly affected by the offensive line, which I'll touch on here in a moment, but still Geno also makes really bad decisions where he just throws picks where you're like, dude, what did you see here? Or he'll fumble, and just overall his turnovers just don't outweigh his potential talent. And lastly, his body language and pouting on the sideline is pretty bad. When DK Metcalf has to go over to you and tries to calm you down, you know it's not looking too good. Now getting to the player personnel in 2024 for the Seahawks. And this also kind of goes back to the 2023 team and even probably the 2022 team to an extent. Simply put, the Seahawks just have a lack of talent. I really don't understand why people thought Mike Macdonald coming into 2024 was going to be this all-powerful football wizard and he was going to somehow fix this roster that had no turnover whatsoever. They weren't good last year, people, and they weren't very good in 2022. I know they made the playoffs, but they got killed by the Niners. Last year, they had glaring issues all over the defensive side of the ball, all over the offensive side of the ball, and they did really nothing to change that here in 2024, and they expected it to change somehow. That is just maddening to me. I do not understand that whatsoever. Their defense is not good at all. Yeah, they may be okay when they play a really bad team or just a mediocre team, but simply put, I know what greatness looks like when it comes to a Seahawks defense. We all do. All the Seahawks fans do. We've seen one of the best defenses ever. This team in 2024 isn't even the same universe as those old teams. And not really changing any of it, I don't get how you're expected to be better. You don't have any good safeties. Your corners aren't great. Woolen's horrible. Witherspoon, he's fine. I think he's overhyped in my opinion. I think he's serviceable, but I don't think he's great. They don't have any linebackers. I know they just traded for a linebacker who was with the Titans. I think Ernest Jones, right? His name used to be a Ram too. But whatever. He's not prime Bobby Wagner, prime Malcolm Smith, or KJ Wright. And then their defensive line is just awful too. As much as people want to pump up the tires on Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams and whoever else, I'll just be completely honest. I just don't see it. I don't know why they paid Williams all that money. He wasn't a world beater. He wasn't a game wrecker at all last year. I don't know why they paid him money. Yeah, they gave up some draft capital, but can't you just admit that, yeah, it wasn't worth it? Oh well, move on. But no, you got to go pay him a bunch of money. It's like Jamal Adams. You got to go pay him tons of money. What a horrible trade that was too, by the way. And Byron Murphy, yeah, his name's been called, 3 times this year, and 2 of them were in the New England game. Overall, not very impressed. Now, flip it on the other side of the ball. Offensively, the O-line is awful. We've kind of already touched on that. They are, I think, getting close to being one of the worst offensive lines the Seahawks have had, especially in the last 25 years. It's easily probably one of the worst. It doesn't even come close to the 2013 offensive line, and they weren't all that great, but the 2024 line is just god-awful. I mean, Charles Cross is serviceable, I would say, but everyone else, not so much. Connor Williams right now, the center, who can't even snap a ball to Geno. 2 games in a row, he's snapping balls over his head, stepping on Geno. It's just horrible O-line play. Tight end really isn't a non-factor. Noah Fant, he's been hurt the last couple weeks, catches a few balls, whatever. Now, wide receivers, that's a highlight of this team. That's a kind of a bright spot for the last few years. I mean, they have JSN, they have Lockett, they have DK. Now, do I think DK is overhyped at times? Yes, I do. Do I think they use him like they should at times? No, I don't. They should treat him like how the Niners treat Debo. Put the ball in the guy's hands and make him go do something. But DK also has that problem of fumbling, allowing turnovers. Him and Geno are one and the same in that regard. They like giving the ball to the other team, which is not a good thing, obviously. Then getting down to the running backs, Ken Walker's good. I think he's a good running back, but you have a horrible O-line, so he can't do much. And a lot of the times over the season so far, the Seahawks get behind and they just have to throw all the time, so Walker gets put on the shelf. And since we're there, we'll talk about Charbonnet for a second. Charbonnet, a good, serviceable backup running back. Nothing more, nothing less. But that's kind of the Seahawks State of the Union I wanted to just talk about today. I think they need a new owner. They need to get sold off here sooner than later. They need true ownership, or an ownership group can make real decisions and move on. They need a new GM, straight up. I think Schneider's had his run, and I know people will say, well, he needs another couple years with Macdonald, and yeah, he's gonna probably get it. I understand, but it's time to move on. He's had his peak. He's had pretty much 10 years to figure this out since the glory days of 2013 and 2014, and he hasn't really done much. Yeah, that they've made the playoffs. I get that. Had the Seahawks even been in the bidding for a Super Bowl since 2014? I would say no. Since their Super Bowl appearance in 2014, they've won, off the top of my head, only 3 playoff games. They beat Minnesota in 2015, and they shouldn't have because Blair Walsh shanked that ball. They beat the Lions in 2016, and they beat the Eagles in 2019. That's it. They just went lost in the divisional round after that. They have not been close to a Super Bowl in a very long time, and we need to quit pretending that they are. And again, to reiterate one more time, Mike Macdonald just feels like Jim Mora to me, and that's just not a good thing. I know he's probably going to get another year or two, but as it sits right now, I think it's just too much for him. And of course, the player personnel, they got to move on from Geno after this year. Whether you like him or hate him or somewhere in between, you can't pay a guy $45-50 million to just get sacked all the time. If you're going to have a bad O-line, at least have a young guy back there that's only making $600,000. But in conclusion, I do think the Seahawks need all these things, and they need to just go out and till the land and completely rebuild. They need to go out and just not be good for a year or two. That's the only way you can truly fix this, because as it sits right now, they're never going to get out from under themselves. They're always going to be just mediocre. Being good gets in the way of being great, and that's been their issue for about a decade. And I think that's about all I got to say about the Seahawks right now. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and while you're down there, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, that'd be greatly appreciated. Until next time, guys, everyone have a great day. Thanks for watching.